Hello there. So we're going to talk about HTML, or Hypertext Markup Language. Um, you don't really need to know what hypertext markup language means. You can look that up for yourself, and it can be very interesting. But for the purposes of getting things done, it's completely irrelevant. All we need to know is that HTML is the language that we use to create web pages. When you go on the internet, you see a web page inside of your web browser, and it's kind of mysterious where this thing came from. Web pages are generated in a lot of various ways, but basically, when it gets to your browser for you to look at, it is written in HTML. It's extensible, which means that it can be made more complex, but at its most basic, it's very simple. So much so that on day one, within 10 minutes, well, within 1 minute, anybody can make their own web page as long as they understand just a few of the very basic um, things about HTML. So before we get into an example, we need to go over the basics about what it is. So why do we need HTML? Basically, it's a set of instructions that your web browser can follow so that it can make a web page that is the same as what you had in your head when you were designing it. The web browser needs to understand these instructions, and a human who's writing them and reading them needs to be able to understand these instructions. For that reason, HTML is extremely simple to learn because it's what we call a high level language. That is, it's easy for humans to read it. HTML is really great for that reason. So let's go over the syntax of HTML. Syntax is basically the rules in which a language follows so that it makes sense. For instance, in English, the adjective always precedes the pronoun that it describes. So you have a cold water or hot pizza. In much the same way, when we're talking about HTML, there are basic rules that you need to follow in order for it to make sense. So this is the most basic and important thing that you have to understand about HTML. And when you're trying to write things and trying to learn more about it, always come back to this sort of truism that HTML web pages are built out of this concept here. An HTML page is comprised of numerous what we call elements. An element is comprised of an opening tag, a closing tag, and the content in between them. I've just written tag right here. There's not actually any HTML tag called tag. An element is a thing like a paragraph or a heading or a link or an image. They all follow this basic structure of an opening tag, something in between, or something in the middle, and then a closing tag. So that's altogether referred to as an element. So we're going to go through step by step how a web page is created using a series of these elements. So I've got here my text editor. I use Text Wrangler because it's cheap, or it's free, and it's really good, very powerful. A new file. I'm just going to save this as a HTML file. The way you do that is just call it hello.html. The way that files work is that the dot and then the letters after it describe what kind of file it is. So like Word documents are .docx, rich text format is .rtf, but HTML is .html. So we'll just call this hello.html and save it there on the desktop. So let's open this up with Google Chrome. And we see that there is nothing here. That's because there we haven't written anything. So you remember that I said that HTML consists of an opening tag, some stuff, and then a closing tag. Well, this is an HTML page, so the most important element that we can create is the HTML page itself. There's the opening tag. There's the closing tag. We're not going to put anything in the middle at the moment. But this here is an element. It's got an opening tag. It's got some stuff, which is empty space, but that's still stuff, isn't it? And a closing tag. So I saved it. And by the way, I'm not going to use the menu. I'm just going to hit Command S. It does the same thing. So I'll reload this page, and still nothing. Well, that's exactly what we would expect. Let's add something to it. Another very important part of an HTML page is this element, the body. This is where the body of your web page goes. I'm sure you're familiar with that expression, like the body of your essay or the body of a paper, whatever. So, opening tag, closing tag, and some stuff in between. Again, there's nothing, just bear with me here. And again, there's nothing, that's totally fine. So we can actually put something that you can see. Let's start with an H1. That's a heading or a header. So opening tag, content, closing tag. This here is a complete element. It's got the opening tag, it's got the content, and it's got the closing tag. What does this look like now? There we go. We've got Hello World. So we made it say the words Hello World because we put it here into the body of the web page. We put H1 at the opening and closing of this bit of content, and so it shows up bold and large. But what if we wanted it to be a little bit smaller? We could do H2. H2. See, it's a smaller heading. What if we wanted it just to be normal text? Well, we would use the P tag. P, as you might guess, stands for paragraph. So there, we have now a web page. Pretty sweet, huh? Note that what we've got here is just a bunch of text. 10 minutes ago, you might not have been able to understand what was going on here in the HTML document, but we've got HTML, we've got these recognizable elements. We've got the HTML element. We've got the body element. We've got the header element. These are all following the same basic tenets about how HTML is created. And that is that you have an opening tag, some content, and then a closing tag. They all work like that. So we could keep on adding stuff, a paragraph. See, it all follows the same pattern. So most of the time, if you double click on an HTML file, it will just open up in your default browser. If you set it specially, then it might open up in your default text editor, but I'm guessing that if I double click, it'll open up in Chrome. And that's what happens. So we've got nothing here in our HTML file. Consequently, when we open it up with Chrome, we see nothing. You can see that instead of like www.google.com or facebook.com or cuteoverload.com, instead we get file, users, T. Gelder, that's my name, desktop, hello. So this is the desktop. There's a file called hello.html, and here it is in the address bar. That's how web browsers work. They go to a specific address and they get the file that's there. So, as we were saying, HTML is a bunch of elements. They have an opening tag, they have a content in the middle, and then they end with a closing tag. So I'm going to make the most basic web page possible, and then we will sort of identify the elements within it. So it starts out with HTML, ends with HTML. That's an element in and of itself. Then there's the body, just like the body of a paragraph, or the body of a paper that you're writing. Body, and then here in the middle, we're going to put some actual content that someone is going to be able to see. So we'll do H1 Hello World. H1 stands for heading 1. There's 6 headings possible. I won't write them all right now, but basically you have headers and then you have paragraph text and images and lists and such. So what does this look like? There we go. Hello World. I wrote it over here. It displayed over here. This is a web page. With these 7 lines, 2 of those lines have nothing on them. With these 7 lines of code, I've made a web page. And you can too. If you just wrote this verbatim, saved it as something.html, and then double-clicked on it, then it would open up in your browser, and you can just say that you've created your own web page. And that's pretty wild as far as I'm concerned. But as we were saying, that HTML consists of elements, an opening tag, a closing tag, and some stuff in between. So where do we find those in hello.html? Clearly right here we've got it. We've got an opening tag, h1, a closing tag, /h1, and then the content, hello world. If we had different tags there, like say P for paragraph, then it would look like that, just regular text. If we had H2, then it would be a different size heading. Don't sweat this too much. The different size headings, like most of the time you'll only use like 1, 2, and 3, because after that they get really small and not actually that useful. See? They get smaller and smaller. So these 3 are clearly elements in the fashion that you're used to, of having it be an opening tag, the content, and then a closing tag. Very straightforward. But let's kind of expand our idea of how it's laid out. I'll get rid of these superfluous ones. But there's 2 other elements on this document that we can see right now. They might be laid out a little differently, but the principle is exactly the same. Like here we have body. We have an opening body tag, the closing body tag, and then some content inside. You can put HTML elements inside of other HTML elements where permitted. It's kind of like a HTMLception. I have to make that joke, sorry. So we have the body tag with our content on the inside, because this is the body of the web page, and that's where content goes. A third and final element is the HTML element. Starts with an HTML tag. It ends with a closing HTML tag. And its content is all of the other stuff in the document. It's literally everything on this HTML document is the content of the HTML tag. So if we go back to what I was saying earlier about how HTML is just a standard way of giving instructions to the browser, you can think of the browser as having kind of a an internal monologue. When it receives hello.html, it starts talking to itself. And let's make this a little bit more complex. We'll give it 2 elements, or 2 content elements, hello, an h1 and a paragraph. Looks like that. So when the browser receives hello.html, it starts reading from the very first line in the very first position. So it sees HTML and it says to itself, oh, this is an HTML document. I better make a web page. The body. Okay, the body started. This is all the stuff that the nice people on the other end of the computer are actually going to see. Skip a line. Line 3, there's nothing on there. I don't care about that. What about line 4? Ooh, H1. That means that whatever is about to be written to me should be displayed in big, bold letters and be on its own line. So what are they saying should be the heading? Hello world. And oh, there we go. We're at the end of this. There's the closing tag. I guess I don't need to be making an H1 anymore. What's next? Oh, we got the P tag. This must be a paragraph. So I'm going to go ahead and render all the text that is about to follow as just regular looking text. Not bold, not italic, not huge, just regular text, however the style has been set. So this is a paragraph. Well, that's kind of boring. Oh, closing tag. Well, that's the end of that paragraph. I don't have to be making a paragraph anymore. What's next? We got blank space, and then, oh, we got the end of the body. There's the closing body tag. Well, I guess that means that I'm not actually going to be displaying anything anymore. Did this person code correctly and end their HTML? Oh, yes, they did. This is the end of the document. I can stop caring now. So that is the conversation that the browser has with itself. And if it helps you, you can have that kind of conversation with yourself when you're trying to write this code. But at its basics, this is what HTML looks like. It's a series of elements, which are comprised of an opening tag, a closing tag, and then content in between. Sometimes it's extremely straightforward, like with this paragraph and this heading right here, where it's content that we're seeing. And then sometimes it's a bit more meta, like with the body and the HTML tags. Just know that these always come at the beginning and at the end, and you don't really have to worry about them other than that. So, I hope this has enlightened you a bit on how HTML works, and we'll see you in the next video.